Hi, African Cremo subscribers, viewers, and friends. Welcome. It's yet another day, and wow, what a late show we have today. 11:30. Wow, wow, wow. So yes, today we're having a show. We're actually going to be talking about relationships, divorce, separation, isolation, and the reason why we decided to pick on this topic is because we are aware that there are so many couples that are having problems during this Christmas season. During the end of the year is when a lot of people actually make decisions about their relationships. And many of the times you find that people divorce or separate at this time during the end of the year. In the UK, there's a kind of running joke going where people decide based on the number of presents they want to give away who they're going to kick out of their present list. And in some cases, that is when they decide that they're actually going to get rid of that one boyfriend or girlfriend. Or when they decide that they're going to actually make a life-changing decision before they go into the next year. So, before I go further, I'm going to say apologies for not being there on Friday. Unfortunately, we had visitors. This is Christmas season, and we have visitors coming into the country, and we get locked out if things get late and it gets way too late for the show. Sometimes it can happen. So, for those of you who are traveling over the Christmas season, we wish you journey mercies. And for those families who are hosting their loved ones back home, we also wish you a good final holiday season. And today we're going to have Susan, who is a lawyer and a mediator and a workshop facilitator, lead us through today and take us through this issue of relationships with the issue of divorce and separation. Today we're not going to do a news roundup, but we will be having one on Wednesday, okay, before the show. Today we will just run into the show because we're going to make it short, maybe about half an hour, and then after that, wind off, okay? So, welcome to the live, Susan, and lead us on this discussion as we look at various personalities who have decided to call it quits this year, 2024. Thank you, Susan.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here, and I hope you are too. We're looking forward to your comments in the section so that we can grow together in the discussion. And we are just whetting your appetite on the issue and just introducing or just having starting a conversation on pain, GBV, divorce, separation, isolation. And we have been doing a series relating to gender-based violence, ending gender-based violence, and trying to create some awareness, doing some advocacy on on the issue. And today we'll take it a little further and look at it in the context of divorce, separation, and isolation. So gender-based violence takes a number of forms. We've discussed this before, but just to highlight some of the ones that are there: rape, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, which includes abuse of position, and abuse of position, and where you can profit from through money or socially or politically. Sexual abuse, physical assault, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, forced marriage. Forced marriage is when you're forced to, compelled by culture to marry somebody. You're of age, but you're compelled to marry somebody who you do not really wish to marry for whatever reasons. And then we have early child marriage, that is marriage of underage girls. And then we also have psychological and emotional abuse, and we have also economic abuse, trafficking in persons, harmful traditional practices, and female infanticide, that is the unaliving of female children. We know in some cultures having female children is not a plus. We find that with some cultures, the females are the ones who have to raise the dowry, and those particular cultures they're not really happy when a girl child is born. And then son preference. This is something that we see quite a bit in the in the African cultures where you have the preference for males. So in the context of those, we've just talked about gender-based violence, and even as I've mentioned some of these, we can even anticipate the type of pain we're talking about that comes out of this. So now, in Kenya, we have 5 regimes of marriage, and they are the Christian marriage, we have the Islamic marriage, we have the customary marriage, we have the civil marriage, and we have the Hindu marriage. Of these, 2 are potentially polygamous, that is the customary marriage and the Islamic marriage. And the reason why I've said potentially is because it's up to the 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 male spouse whether he's going to marry others, but he may choose not to, even though they've engaged in a potentially polygamous union. And then the other 3 are monogamous. That means you have one man and one wife at any time. So we have, those are the Christian marriages, the civil one, and the Hindu ones. So now that we've established that, the context of, we know that one of the reasons for divorce or even separation, one of the grounds is actually, can fall into these categories that I described here. Physical violence, or it's called cruelty, and there's also something they call depraved behavior. So when we have that type of behavior, those are they call is, what is the language is actually exceptional depravity, and this is where there is extreme trauma, and this allows for a divorce petition to be submitted to the court or to lodged in court before the 3-year waiting period has elapsed. And so these are extreme acts that the spouse, the petitioner, finds very, very, very offensive, mentally and psychologically offensive, and they cannot abide the 3-year wait. There have been some reported cases of that nature in our history and in our courts. One that I recall was where the petitioner's husband was sodomizing his wife, and she was so traumatized by the whole thing that she took the matter to court, and the petition was granted. She was allowed to prosecute her petition before the 3 years period was up. So other grounds for divorce include, well, cruelty is the one that relates to GBV, gender-based violence. Also, and then of course the exceptional depravity. Others include, which are not necessarily, related to GBV, but they include, for the Hindus, conversion to another religion, and incurable insanity. That's where there's no cure for it. So those are some of the grounds. So there's this linkage between cruelty, gender-based violence, and actually marriages that situations that lead to divorce. And any party can file for divorce. The some of the things include actually even the physical abuse of children. The children are unsafe. The petitioner, that would be the spouse, the female spouse, or the male spouse, may decide to petition just to separate the family, because that is not an environment in which children should be brought up. And usually, if the children are victims of violence, it usually starts with the spouse, the petitioner. They are victims of violence, and the children will also suffer that violence as a result of it. Remember, in earlier episodes, we talked about familicide, and we talked about how, and when we talk about familicide, it's where the not the survivors, the perpetrator unalives his whole family, those who are within his vicinity, within that space where that action will take place or takes place, where he has planned to do it. We talked about, remember, the Nyanyuki case, the Joyce Omvua case, where she traveled to Nyanyuki in accordance with a court order to grant her estranged husband access to his two children. Well, they never came back to Nairobi. They ended up unalived, and he buried them in shallow graves in Nyanyuki. That case is still ongoing in the courts. We'll see how that case will be decided. There was the other one we talked about, where in Minnesota, where the same thing happened, where the Kibabe case, where the Mr. Kibabe, the perpetrator, unalived his wife and two children, and he left a small child. He did not harm that one, but his intention was also to unalive himself, but it didn't work. So he's still alive, and he's serving 76.5 years in jail. So some of these are the consequences of gender-based violence. You know, it can go to certain extremes. It can be grievous bodily harm, actual bodily harm, and go all the way to, you know, serious impairment, physical impairment, serious mental impairment, and even to, in extreme cases, to death. And
Yeah.
as we talk, yes,
Thank you, Susan. I have a question from Louis. Thank you for that. We talk about
yes,
gender-based violence being a precursor to divorce and separation, right? Gender-based violence.
yes,
But Louis has a
one of the
question
grounds,
in the,
yeah,
I beg your pardon?
one of the grounds for divorce
One of the
and
grounds, yeah. But
separation. Yeah,
Louis is asking about another ground here. He's asking, I have a
yeah,
question. Is the below
yes.
statement a fact? When a woman initiates a breakup because she has found someone else, it means she has decided to end her current relationship because she has developed romantic feelings for another person, often.
Mhm.
So he's saying, signifying that she is no longer invested in her current partnership and has a better potential with a new person. So he's
Mhm.
asking, is this statement a fact? That when a
Just read
woman
it again.
initiates a breakup because she's
Yeah.
found someone else, it means
Mhm.
she has decided to end her current relationship because of developing romantic feelings for another person. So she's not longer invested in the current partnership and sees a better potential in the new person. Does that fit under a reason for divorce? Can somebody divorce because they've found another partner, they're no longer vested in their current partner, and they've identified a
Okay.
different partner, potential partner, to be
Um,
more,
okay. I'm a little
and would that
disturbed by.
qualify to be gender-based violence, like emotional violence? I mean, come on. I mean,
No,
people are, this is the season, man. This is the reason for the season.
okay.
This
So
is the
basically,
season that people are doing these things. Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Basically, that cannot, you know, just that the fact that you've fallen in out of love with your partner. I mean, in Kenya, you'd have a problem just trying to say something like that, that you've fallen out of love. The grounds are actually quite strict in terms of, first of all, you cannot even collude. You know, you have to say that you have not condoned that behavior in a divorce petition. So they cannot be in Kenya right now. You cannot consent to be divorced. So it has to be, it's like a situation where you have not agreed to separate, you know. And so when first of all, using the, you know, when you say potential, in better potential in somebody else, um that that is not something that even any court would, in my view, would condone. You'd have to really show that the marriage has irretrievably broken down, and you have to come up with facts, because the court can refuse and say you have not met the 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 uh, the level of evidence that they want. That's the evidentiary threshold. So you have not been able to prove that the marriage has irretrievably broken down, or you've not been able to prove that this person has deserted the marriage. That would be another thing that perhaps would happen when you are separated for a period of up for 2 years or something like that, or you're not able to live in the same space, but there has to be a cause for the separation. So just saying that you've fallen out of love of the other person is in itself cannot stand. On top of that, when the argument is that the person has found somebody with greater potential already, I think that is changing the meaning within the context of marriage, especially the changing. It doesn't align well with our understanding of what a marriage is. That you would find somebody of greater potential. That is a very transactional sounding relationship, and usually what happens in my experience when I used to do a lot of these cases is that it is not that it's not that somebody has fallen out of love with somebody. Most of the time, there is another thing that has happened in the family. For instance, adultery, where one is committing adultery, where there's cruelty, where there's desertion, and somebody has just separated themselves from that person and moved to another space. But usually there's a trigger to that, so it's not something I would. Is that statement true? It doesn't fit well within our context or our understanding here of grounds for divorce. And like I said, that transactional level there really doesn't sit well. You will not succeed in court by using such language. Yeah. Yes.
In Kenya, would that work in a case of no fault divorce? Do we have something like no fault divorce?
No.
In Kenya?
Yeah. No, we don't.
That's why you said we cannot consent. Nobody can consent to a divorce.
No. Right. You can't consent. But what happens in practice is that, for instance, if the parties have agreed that the marriage has irretrievably broken down, right? Let's say there are no issues. Right? One of them might bring the petition, but they still have to prove it in court. So they still have to prove that this marriage has broken down and provide sufficient evidence to the court that it has broken down. I know of one case where my own experience as an advocate was where the court refused to grant the divorce and said that it was not proved to the level that the court was not satisfied that the facts that were given proved that the marriage had irretrievably broken down. So the court, that discretion belongs to the court. They cannot. There's no consent. So like I was explaining earlier, what the parties do is that because you can't agree, one will petition, and when you petition the court, the other one may decide not to file a response. So you go in, but you still have to prove your case, regardless of whether it is opposed or whether there's a respondent, who has decided to challenge what you're saying. So that's the way it is here. I know in countries like England, you can actually do it by consent. There's no need even to give too much evidence. I think it's less messy. The less you need to talk about whatever has caused the pain, the better always. But because there are children involved, there's some details they don't really need to find out about. But unfortunately, in the course of these matrimonial proceedings, a lot of information and debt comes out, which is completely unnecessary. Our children are the ones who suffer as a result. So and it's a painful process. Divorce is actually a very, very painful process because you have to talk about things which, especially if they relate to cruelty, even adultery, you have to talk about things which every time you talk about them, you're being re-traumatized by that experience. You're reliving that pain. So, it's quite a traumatizing thing. And in fact, sometimes you even have to adjourn the case because maybe the testimony is too painful for the spouse who is the petitioner to continue to talk about. Thank
you so much for that clarification. Listen, there's a tendency in this country for couples to separate forever and never divorce. Is this the
Yeah.
reason why? Is it because of the process, how difficult it is to go through the divorce process and how re-traumatizing it is, or how embarrassing it might be? Or is it because of the cost of the divorce? Because this is a situation. So, for example, let's take an example of the Sarah Kabu story. It looks like she's been separated from Mr. Kabu since June of this year, but we
Yeah.
only got to know about it in November, December. Is it just this month? Six
Yeah.
months later is when we're getting to figure out that these people, Bonfire Adventures couple, the world famous, tourism couple, are not even living together. Yet that they have been separated for like about 6 months, to the point where now, when the public is hearing about it, it seems like Susan, not Susan, Sarah, Sarah seems to have moved on already. She seems to already have moved on. In fact, there are comments in the comment section where they say things like, who you already, she healed when she was in the marriage. She healed while she was in the marriage. Because we hear that for many women, when they're actually planning to divorce, it takes many years for them to plan it. You could be planning for 5 to 7 years that you're going to be leaving this person. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so you hear stories like, huyu aliponea ndani alikuwa ameshapona. So she already contemplated the divorce. So she was already divorced in her mind and in her spirit, and so by the time it was happening, she's doing all well. But we also saw her break down and talk about how she attained her new name. She calls herself Sarah Mtali now. Mtali is a traveler, is a tourist, right? So she calls herself Sarah Mtali, and that is a name that she was given by her son, who said that they don't want to hear the name Kabu anymore. They're so traumatized by their father that they no longer want to hear the name Kabu mentioned in their home anymore. And the reason why, if anyone is not aware about this, the reason why Sarah filed for divorce against Simon is because of adultery and cruelty. And she had even contacted the police many times and not received any proper response from the police, to the point where she
Yeah.
finally got in touch with the DCI, and the DCI finally came through for her. But she had evidence of of physical attacks from her husband, physical
Yeah.
GBV, gender-based violence, physical. And she says that she was covering them with makeup. Yeah. And so I saw that she was actually being welcomed to the singles club by another another YouTuber, who was telling her, you know what, on this side, be ready to be isolated, to be mocked, laughed at, but in the end you'll have a lot of peace. It's a
Mm.
peaceful side, but you also have to bear the weight, the burden of the society, of stigma, and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering to myself, what keeps people in a quote unquote marriage, which is not real, and just separated without ever getting divorced? And this is the case for many men as well. It looks to me that very many men um, have a difficult time, especially African men and Kenyan men, or I don't know, I think it's African men. Very many African men don't want that tag of divorce, or having divorced, or being divorced by their women, especially if it's the woman who has filed for the divorce. You'll find a lot of husbands are actually creating difficulty. They're creating barriers, to stop their women from actually filing divorces, and even threatening
Yeah.
them, threatening
Yeah.
their lives. If you go through
Yeah.
with this divorce, I will deal with you, and the children.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
has something. It has
It's
something to do
just a
with
crazy
status.
situation, isn't it? Hmm?
Yeah, it has something to do with status in society.
Status.
For
Yes.
instance,
Do
if
men
you
gain
are,
status more than women for being married? Where we
it
think that
yeah, it
women
has
actually get more status, do you think that it's actually the men who are getting more status from the tag of being
actually
married?
it's both. One of the reasons why people don't really rush into marriage, into divorce, and they stay in, like you said, long term separation, is the stigma. And you see, the separation really is not really an announcement. It can be done quietly, but a divorce is like an announcement also, that you have decided to go completely your separate ways. And even the separation you're talking about may not be actually a court mandated one, or what we call a judicial separation. It could be a separation physically, that just one person lives here and the other one lives there, and they've somehow done it without really getting any, there's no court intervention on the issue. And it has something to do with status, it has something to do with stigma. We're talking about maybe somebody who is looked up to, he's a mentor to many, stuff like that. You heard several of the cases that we've looked at. Sarah Kabu, she talked about people looking up to her and her being a role model and stuff like that, and others too. And it's really something that makes them reluctant to separate until they make that decision to take action. So long-term separations are also a way of because of the trauma of the relationship that you were in, uh, to sort of like be a barrier to anybody else who may be interested in having a relationship with you. So you know really be saying, I'm still married, I'm married. So it really stops you from engaging in a relationship with somebody else. The other thing is, especially in the cases where we have spouses who are in business partnership with one another, and those are the most complex of them, because if they have the business together, it's difficult for them to really get divorced, because it becomes messy when you start try to divide assets and stuff like that. And I found in my experience that that is perhaps the toughest part, um, when you have a business empire, and a big one that has been created by by joint effort of both partners. We saw the same situation of business partners was there with the case of Florence and Jero and Elias. They were business partners as well. They're doing their business in Nakuru, a real estate business. You have the same case with Sarah and with the Kabus, with Sarah, and I forgot her husband's name, but Mr. and Mrs. Cab, although Sarah does not wish to use that name, that's another thing that we need to pay attention to, is that identity that you have, with that person. It's difficult for somebody to just change their name overnight, also be a different person. Many women, after they come out of these type of relationships, these are, a situation, they're coming out of a relationship of being a spouse to somebody, they find it difficult. They don't, there's an identity crisis of some sort, in terms of what is my name. What is my name? For so many years I've been called, using my husband's last name, and now what is my name? Especially if it's very acrimonious, or you associate that name personally, even without the children, with pain, with humiliation, with harassment, and you just want absolutely nothing to do with that name. So the issue there would be, what is my name? And that can be another reason why, we find, I'm now talking, I moved off from the long-term separation reasons, but I've now looked at, you talked about renaming. And that's something that you find quite often. You find people eventually, after they've got past the fact, okay, I don't want to use this name anymore, I want to use my middle name. Others actually have gone and picked a name and done a deed poll and called themselves by that new name. And that name that they've picked may not be their father's, their maiden name. It will just be another name. I've seen that happening too in some cases. And then the other thing is, yeah, for sure, the gender-based violence and adultery situations, and there's some of them you find, not some of them, gender-based violence, and women will persevere for a while before leaving. It's not often that a woman will leave immediately. That's my observation in the matrimonial cases that I handled, where there was cruelty and gender-based violence. It has occurred over a period of time, and the reason being that it's not just the physical injury that is going on. There's the economic control sometimes. There's also the physical and the psychological and emotional, you know, abuse that is occurring. So there, you know, there's a lot that is going on over a period of time, and in the West they call it uh, coercive control, where somebody has controlled you to the point where you are not even able to think clearly about many things. And this is another reason why women don't leave, uh, even, you know, they persevere until they get to this point where they come to the realization that this is more dangerous for me to stay here than not. And actually, the statistics show that women in abusive relationships will attempt to leave up to 7 times before they eventually leave. Um, so, you know, that is how difficult it is for people to extricate themselves from a abusive marriage. Yeah, because that's the context. And separation is a step. Often it's a step towards divorce. But for some people, because of their faith and their religion, they just get the legal separation, and that's the way they live. Um, but because there's some religions which do not condone divorce, they're very strict on it. I know Catholics are very strict on it, um, and so even it might be something to do with your family rules, the you know what your family believes in and stuff like that. So you wouldn't want to get a divorce because the label divorcee, perhaps carries a stigma which the family doesn't want to deal with. But the reality of it is that it should not be carrying that stigma, because people don't just divorce. They're not frivolous applications. They're not frivolous petitions. By the time somebody, at least in Kenya, deciding to divorce a spouse, they have sat down and thought about it, and it's a process, like you said. It's not something that happened overnight. There's been continuous abuse, and that person has been slowly, perhaps mentally, disengaging themselves from the abusive spouse over a period of time. So by the
Yeah.
time they're leaving, that emotional connection is reduced, and it's a decision that they have made. Maybe they have been trying to um, even establish their own spaces and stuff like that. So these are some of the things that make it's maybe when you were saying that she looked, um, the high profile figure you were talking about looked like she had already left. It's possible, so mentally she had already left because she'd had perhaps enough of what was going on in that home. That is very rare. It's very rare for women in particular just to walk out of a marriage like that. It may happen, but at least it is very rare for it to happen, because women are very invested in their marriages. They don't just do it because everybody else is doing it, and especially if they're children, it's not something that they can walk out of very easily. You wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to talk about why it is that two things. First of all,
Mm,
why it
mm,
is that in many cases, thank you so much, first
yeah,
of all, for all that enlightenment. I think I'm seeing a lot of people are interested in this subject. Guys, come inside and watch in the live stream. You can watch in this live stream. Thank you for watching on Facebook and on YouTube. It's a very
yeah,
important topic. We need to talk about it, with some
yeah,
sort of mental stability. We
yeah,
need to be sober and have some sobriety as we're talking about this very important topic, because divorce is not like just like quitting a relationship. It's like you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you say, I don't want to see you anymore, because this involves the extended family. There's so many vested
yeah,
interests in a marriage.
yeah,
There's the
yeah,
government, there's your family, there's your children, there's your job. In some cases, there's some jobs that require you to be married, or look up, or should I say, give you more of status when you are married. Like, for example, if you happen to be a religious person, like, for example, the religious fraternity, the pastors, the bishops, and the rest, they rarely get divorced or things like that. And also presidents. You see that, for example, maybe you're running for office, you'll find that quickly a separated couple is going to be portrayed as if they've been living together all their lives. Yeah. The couple who has
Yeah.
been separated, one of the partners will be asked to come back into the marriage quickly so that this person can be elected. He can be seen to be a family man.
Yeah.
And this is something we have seen it in Kenya a lot. Yeah. So
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
cases, even your job depends on you being married, in
Yeah.
many cases. And in some cases, some jobs will not be given to single people just because they trust married people more with responsibility. So there's a lot, and especially for men in that particular case. Yeah. And yeah. So what I wanted to ask is, why is it that so many times, and I'm sure you guys can also say, please ask questions. Why is it that okay, I hate to point to the guys, but why is it that so many times the men are so surprised when their wife finally files for divorce? Because usually most men who know that their wives are not happy, many of them tend to try to chip away at the woman's self-esteem, telling them you will never survive without me. I mean, what are you ever going to amount to? How can you educate the children? You don't have a job. Where are you going to start? Who's going to want you with 4 kids? Who's going to want you with 2 children? Look at you now. You're just, a shell of the image that I married. Because most of the women, by the time that they're filing for divorce, they're so beaten up. Their self-esteem is so down. But why is it that the men are so surprised by this? Why are they so surprised and offended? Why is it?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's actually quite surprising for me. Why it is that especially men get so surprised and shocked by divorce. I've also seen that in some cases, what women tend to do instead of actually divorcing is get another partner on the side, somebody who's going to be helping them with their self-esteem, filling in the gap that the husband has left. And a lot of men are very surprised to discover that their women actually have relationships on the side, and they're married, and they're not even separated. But in the mind of the woman, she's actually separated from her husband, and that's the reason why she's having these relationships. Because it's very difficult. What I know as a woman is that it's very difficult to split your loyalties between a man and your husband and another man, especially if he's treating you right. It's very difficult to do that. So the thing is that, why is it that men get so surprised when they're divorced? Why is it that they're surprised when they find out that their wives are actually having relationships on the side? They are. A lot of women are having relationships on the side. They'd rather be married, have the tag married, be wearing a wedding band. Yeah. But on the other hand, they know that their husband is not satisfying their emotional needs or their physical needs. And so they have a relationship on the side. And so
Yeah.
the question is, all of this
Yeah.
pretense and hypocrisy, the question is, again, when it comes to people who are, high profile, people like
Yeah.
Sarah Cabus of this world. We also have the DJ Mo and size 8s of this world. And all these people who are pretending to be in good, happy marriages for so long, and all of a sudden they divorce. And that is also creating a new fear of marriage amongst young people. So there are so many issues here. The issue is shock and awe. The issue is the changing culture where people are not, happy. They're kind of worried about getting married.
Yeah.
And then there are others who are outrightly telling people, don't get married. Don't. Avoid marriage. Just avoid it. Why do you want to
Yeah.
wake up and in the middle of the night to cook for your man? Why do you want, especially women are always being told, why would you want to be married? Why would you want to have a husband? And yet you know
First,
that the base of
mhm.
society without married couples, what's going to happen to the children? What's going to happen to the family unit? I don't know.
Yeah.
This thing is huge, it's huge.
Yeah.
Sorry for the
So
thousands of.
first of all, yeah. First of all, marriage is marriage is a very, very important institution for humanity, and it's something that we should encourage. And the naysayers, we need to really you know speak, create awareness, and do advocacy on why marriage is actually a healthy thing. It's like you said, we raise children, we raise families within that context of um, parents in a family setting and all that, and that is really important. The question about why are men surprised, really, abusive spouses or partners are don't really care about the feelings of the other person. So they continue to be abusive because they're actually driven by the desire to control everything, and so they're not, their level of self-awareness is quite low in terms of the needs of the other person. So they get surprised because they think they have been able to control and manipulate this person to the extent that they're so much under their wing that they cannot think for themselves. They are a shadow of who they are, and they are able now um, to determine and dictate how they're going to behave or even to respond in any given situation. That is not a good situation to find yourself in, whether you're a male or a female. We've seen some really terrifying documentaries in this space of domestic violence. You can find them if you just check on YouTube. Real stories, true stories, told even by policemen who have investigated some of these cases of women abusing men, and it's just such a, you know, painful thing to watch when you see something like that, where you see two human beings who decided they love each other, to they get married, they've lived together for a while, and there's this terrible abuse going on in their home. And whether it's a male doing it or a female doing it is completely unacceptable. Because if you care about somebody, even their mental health is important to you, their satisfaction, their sense of fulfillment is really very important to you. So the reason why they get surprised is they don't care. You're not a person to them, and they don't see that you have needs which are independent of them. They dictate every single part of what you need and what you don't need, and they control you. They even want to make sure they know who your friends are. They can determine which of your friends you're going to interact with. They look at your phone. In fact, I was watching one show on YouTube, and this gentleman who belongs to uh, one of these men only spaces said, one of these websites on the manosphere, he said that only a foolish man does not check his wife's phone. In other words, he was saying that men should be, are supposed to, if you to check who the wife is calling and who she is communicating. Um, I don't know how many of us here watching and me and even listening to me making that statement are quite appalled that we could have males advising other males that you must check your wife's phone. And if you don't check your wife's phone or your intimate partner's phone, then you are a fool. Um, you know, and she's not talking about her checking his phone. He's talking about the man checking his wife's phone. So they don't really care. And then the the reason why you find women, perhaps, and it's not something that we can say, we're not commenting on whether it's right or wrong here. We're just saying the reason why you find women straying and looking for the support they desire from, their spouse is because of just that, because that support, they're not getting it, and so they're looking for it elsewhere, because maybe they're very starved of that within their marriage. And it's very true that if you just even, it doesn't matter which space it is, whether it's in church or in a more like a secular setting, the young people are actually afraid of marriage. Reason being that the instances they've seen a lot of marriages breaking up even after a very short time, regardless of how much, we've seen a lot of high society weddings. um, there's been a lot of investment. Depending on which culture you come from, there are always these steps, especially the Africans here. There are some steps that are taken in a marriage which are very traditional, which engages and involves the whole family, like Queen Mo said. And there are certain things and exchanges that take place, number of visits. When we're talking about investment, it's not just emotional investment, it's also economical investment. So when you think about all that being done, and then in a few years the marriage is not going well, then it causes some concern. So the fear of marriage is there among the young people, and because they've seen it doesn't really work very well. Um, but that has something to do with some of the things that are influencing the parties to that union. Because we can end up, we were talking in this video on this show, we're talking about the pain of gender-based violence, divorce, separation, and isolation. And you know, the whole pain, the whole thing they have witnessed, maybe it's an older sibling, a friend, the neighbor, the wedding they attended, and they can see this is a very, very painful thing. So I know that some institutions, some churches, we know, have programs really to encourage the young people not to see or not to fear marriage. And marriage is really what people make out of it. Two marriages can never be identical. It's really about the parties really working on it, so that it works well. When you find people are straying, it means, especially women, when they're straying from the marriage, it means there's some unmet needs, and it has got to a point where that happens. Ignored. Maybe the husband doesn't even come home. You know, he's elsewhere doing whatever he's doing, and this happens. Um, Also, like I was talking about earlier, about some spaces which are very toxic and which are very damaging to relationships. And I just want to mention something about the manosphere. I did some research on it, and so looked at its links with gender-based violence. So the manosphere basically is um, is a space which is, you know, it's described as what? It's described as a diverse collection of websites, blogs, online forums, promoting masculinity, misogyny, and opposition to feminism. And for example, we're talking about men's rights activists and incels, which are involuntary celibates. Also, another group called Men Going Their Own Way. These are men who decided to separate themselves completely from women. And then there's the pickup artists, where their goal is seduction and sexual success. And then we have the father rights movement. Actually, a lot of these movements were started as a result of men's disappointment of outcomes in divorce proceedings or custody proceedings regarding their children. Because and something I want to highlight here, and is that when it comes to custody of children, the court's consideration is not the parents, it's not the mother or the father. It is the best interest of the child, and the child will be placed in the hands of the parent that the court finds after hearing evidence, and even listening to a guardian or ad litem, or somebody who's standing in to who has gone in. And in Kenya we have what we call children officers. I'm sure in other countries we do as well. Here in Kenya, probation officers double up as children officers because we don't have enough. And so they go and do what they call a home visit, and they ask children questions, especially those who are 14 years and above, and even younger. They'll talk to them just to get a feel of their, you know, if it came to custody, uh, who would they prefer to stay with. But after a lot of analysis, they make some sort of recommendation to the court. So these father rights activists, these father rights groups, are actually the ones who have, they said, the video I was listening to said, this is why their disappointment in custody matters and access matters regarding their children has pushed them towards now this other extreme side. What I'm just highlighting here is that there's nothing wrong with men deciding to sit down in a group and support each other and have these discussions. But the problem is when these take up some extreme views and find other, we start blaming things like feminism as the cause of all their wars. In fact, one of the people I was listening to was saying, but you know, men's rights and feminism should be supporting one another, not fighting against one another. Because the feminists are not fighting the men rights movement, but it's the men's rights movements who are fighting the feminists. They see them as the enemy. And some of the reasons, some of the other things that we need to highlight, and these extreme views which can really mess up a marriage. And I was watching even some testimonies of ladies who were saying how their spouses or intimate partners got involved in this men rights movement, and they completely changed, and it completely destroyed their relationships with those men. And they are united in the belief that society is biased against men because of feminism. They also believe that feminists support misandry, which is hatred of men, which is not correct. And so it's associated with online harassment, and particularly of women who are high, high profile figures. We heard the Chief Justice of Kenya recently saying that she was being cyberbullied, and it was gender based. And some of the things she said, some of the things I tried to listen to the discourse as to why, why the lawyers were cyberbullying her or making those comments, which she was calling cyberbullying. I've not done a deep enough analysis of them, but one of the things that caught my attention was they were talking about the backlog of cases. But historically, the courts have always had a backlog of cases. So it's not something that has happened recently. It has always been a problem in the courts. There's always, there are not enough judges, and there've always been a backlog. So for her to be accused of not dealing with that issue correctly, to me, sort of points to cyberbullying. Justifies her claim. So there's online harassment, especially of high profile people. I'm sure if you look in the comments section, or people who have come out and people are talking about them, of the comments section of Sarah Kabu, Sarah Mtali's, anything that is posted there and that discussion is there, they will say there's some comments there which are quite unpalatable. You know, personal to her. And in fact, the video I was listening to, she said she gave a warning, and she said she was going to, for all those YouTube channels that are posting all this and encouraging this negative dialogue about her, she was going to, have them shut down. So basically, that's online harassment. She's not the only one. I was watching I checked the comment section of the case of Elias and Florence, and some of the comments that were there about Florence were very, very, very hurtful and palatable. And yet, at the same time, you're thinking these people are writing some of these things, and Florence is lying in a hospital bed with some missing fingers and 16 stab wounds, and she's recovering from all these things. And then we have, there are also these men's groups we're talking about implicated in radicalizing men into misogyny, and this is not a good thing. Misogyny is not a good thing for a relationship between men and women. Also glorification of violence against women, and also connected with mass shootings, or what they call misogynistic terrorism. So when we're talking about misogynistic terrorism, there are some cases really where it came out because the police investigated and they found out that the motive was misogyny. There were the Isla Vista killings of California in 2015. In 2014, the Umpqua Community College of 2015, and in 2018, Toronto van attack. And then there's a game called Gamergate. All these, the Gamergate game is a game promotes misogynistic online harassment campaign that targeted women in the industry. That was between 2014 and 2015. And so, but they did some investigation. They found in that Gamergate game, there's only a small group of men who were stalking and harassing women. Then these are women who were in that industry. So the Isla Vista killings, just so that you can see how the misogyny responded. And remember, we talked about it being on a spectrum, the type of gender-based violence that we can have. We can have it just from assault, actual bodily harm, grievous bodily harm, to permanent injuries, to even suicide. I mean, suicide pacts and familicide. Now this is terrorism. This is mass shooting, and in this case, um, the young man, in fact, he became well known for it. He was called Elliot Rogers, and he uploaded a video called Elliot Rogers Retribution. And his motive was he wanted to punish women for rejecting him and sexually active men because he envied them. So some of these men rights movements, these are the type of philosophies they carry. So for them, they see women as a problem, and then they've responded. So their response to rejection is not healthy. It's not healthy at all. So in this Isla Vista killings in 2014, there were 7 people unalived and 14 injured. And what he used a gun, he stabbed, and he also drove his vehicle in and rammed into people. And eventually he also killed himself. He unalived himself. So this was a murder-suicide. But he was not going to go alone. He was very frustrated. And this shows an area, where there's need to address this issue, where people become so frustrated and then they start, their response is not healthy. But he did have mental health problems, by the way. He did have mental health problems. So this is called misogynistic terrorism. And then there's the other one, where he killed. This was in Canada. He was called Alex Minasian, and this was in 2018. And he unalived 10, 16 and attempted unaliving, and he was sentenced to life in prison. And he said that he was doing it because he was frustrated, same thing. Although the court was convinced that it was more like for notoriety, he wanted to make a name for himself. So what the judge did, she refused to use his name, and she referred to him as Doe, a John Doe, so that he doesn't gain the notoriety. So these are like some 3 extreme cases. And what is so interesting about these cases is that in some countries are tracing, and they're trying. There's a study that has been done to link misogyny, and let me tell you the name of that study. It's been done to link misogyny. It's a policy brief, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and they've done it, and it's the linkages between violent misogyny and violent extremism and radicalization that can lead to terrorism. So misogyny has been traced. It has been linked to violent acts. It has been linked to terrorism. It was linked in those cases I talked about to mass killings. And it has also been found to be linked also to terrorism. 3 areas we find that. We find that it is seen as a backlash against gender equality. And then there's the role of thwarted, frustrated masculinity is exploited now by terrorist groups when they're doing their recruitment. Yeah. So they recruit people who are frustrated or thwarted masculinity, and this is exploited for recruitment. And also, there's a connection between the people who are recruited into terrorist groups and sexual and gender-based violence, including gender-based hate crimes, as a factor in recruitment to violent extremist groups. So this, when we're talking about these type of spaces, these are extremist spaces. When we're talking about the manosphere, actually some of them have been banned. They have been removed from YouTube, like the one called Men Going Their Own Way, and the incel, the involuntary celibates. They have been banned. from YouTube and Reddit. Yeah. So just a little bit more about these type of groups, and for us to watch out for them, we need to watch out and make sure that for the parents here that our children are not engaging these things, because these are things that are poisonous and will affect their relationship with women, because they are not good spaces for them to be in. Um, the men's rights activists advocate for political changes that will benefit men, but their activism consists of harassment and abuse towards feminists and other female public figures. Remember, I talked about the Chief Justice saying she was being cyberbullied. Then the Chief Justice of Kenya. The men, going their own way, argue that women are so toxic that men should avoid them altogether and avoid commitment, that is, e.g., getting married or befriending them. And then the pickup artists teach men seduction strategies so that they can be more successful in attracting women. And some of the ways they do this, they're very called is insulting them or disregarding consent. Immediately there, disregarding consent will tell you that that is somebody who doesn't care. And an aspect and an element of the sexual abuse is, the rape in particular, is disregarding consent. They don't care, And then the incels, these are involuntary celibates. They feel entitled to a relationship, but they are unable to find a partner. And then fathers' rights groups are associated with what they're calling thinly veiled misogyny. And they undermine victims of domestic violence and blames victims' advocates for adverse decisions by the court when it comes to access to their children. But you see, like I said, this is the decision the court is made is based on the best interest of the child. It's not a decision that's made on the mother or the father. It's made on the best interest of the child. So young people are very affected by these movements, and this is what we need to watch out for. And this could be one of the things that's affecting relationships going forward, and why there's so much pain, and why there's gender-based violence in relationships, and why there is divorce caused by cruelty, and why there is separation also caused by cruelty, is that these young people are influenced to believe that feminine makes it difficult for men to succeed. So, for instance, there's a report in 2020 called Hope Not Hate report, where children 16 to 24, young people, 50% of them believe that statement that I've just said, that feminism makes it difficult for men to succeed. In fact, that report even says, and this is a report that was done in England, that the teachers cannot even teach on gender in class because the males become very, very hostile on that, about that subject. So we must find ways to stop this, to prevent it, because it could be one of the things that is causing pain and damaging relationships. And some of the prevention methodologies are early conversations with young people on healthy relationships and gender relations. This is something we need to take very, very seriously. Perhaps in the years gone by, in the earlier years, we could say it was that traditions, customs, and stuff like that, patriarchy, which still has a role to play here, but which was causing the problem between males and females. And then there's another project, and I'd like us all to take note of this, Online Together project, tackling online hate and breaking down gender stereotypes. So if you type in Online Together project, it's actually a way of addressing some of these extremist views, because it's these extremist views that are causing problems within and causing pain in relationships between men and women. So we need to take care of that. And as I said, there are two reasons why men are falling into these so-called safe spaces for men. But you can see they are toxic spaces, just from what I've said. You can go and do your own research, and you find actually they're not good spaces. Even if there are women's spaces, which were doing that, because we know the extreme spaces for women as well. We need to avoid those spaces that are going to cause those tensions between males and females. So these are males who are nursing heartbreak and rejection, and so rejection and frustration in romantic lives, and grappling with masculine inadequacy. So what is causing that masculine inadequacy, and what is making them not able to accept rejection? Because the truth of the matter, for men and women here, we have been told no, isn't it? It's how you handle it. You've been told no, it's how you handle it. You have to handle it in a healthy way. I know Kenyan men sometimes say, well translated in English, it says, for men, they have to keep trying. It's something, something like that. In other words, is that you don't give up. I mean, you have to, if this one says no, you shouldn't take it so deeply to heart. You look for somebody else who, suits you and who will say yes. And so what is the experience? These men experience loneliness and low self-esteem. And this whole masculine movement divides men into two categories. In fact, it's very divisive because it sort of seems to bolden and to underscore that there are two types of males. There's the alphas and the betas. So the alphas are they think that women, they didn't ask women, but they think that women like the tall, handsome, people with money, men with money, and they're tall and they're handsome. But the truth be told is that that's not true. That is not true. That women only like tall, handsome, if we don't look at their character, we don't care about anything, we just look at these external attributes. That most women will tell you that is not true. These guys have interacted with a certain type of female or woman that has given them that impression, which is wrong. Most of us, in fact, if I'm not wrong, I think I can safely say a very, very high percentage would be surprised to hear that is the image they have in their head. And for the way I've described it, it is not the women who are dividing these men into two groups. It is the men themselves who are dividing. So this is toxic in itself because it's not even based in reality. So these are hurt, angry, and confused men, and they look for explanations to support what they believe. And it's really, something that's quite disturbing. So what are the effects of this?
It's true, Susan. Let me just interrupt you a little bit and say, can I say something quickly? Yeah. I wanted to say that, and we should be winding up the next 5-10 minutes, is that if it's really true that women are only interested in men's physical attributes, then there should be no certain men, like certain parts of the world, who are married at all with any children. Because in general, they're generally short. Yeah. In Kenya, there's a saying where many women like to joke around and say, "Mwanamume ni wallet." So a man is his wallet. The state, how his wallet is. In other words, if he's rich or he has capacity, he has money, he has, things, they don't care about how they look. Actually, I think women are the most accepting. I think the people who have the biggest problem is probably the guys, sorry to say. I think the men are the ones who are more into the physical attributes of their partner more than anything else. Yeah. I think men are actually driven by what they see. There's a saying that men are, men, it's about what they see. They're visual beings. Yeah, and women are actually what we hear.
What they hear. Yeah.
That's why men always tease us and tell women, you people, you like to be lied to. You like to listen to lies. And it's true. I mean, even me, I like to boast that I look like Naomi Campbell, which is the biggest lie. But it feels good, and I'll be quick to believe. I'll also be quick to believe if a man If a male actually said something negative to me, I'd be quick to hear it and to believe it. If the same way that if he said something positive, but you see, I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't give a hoot about whether what he really physical attributes are physical attributes. I think women are very intuitive and in tune with the reality,
Yeah. In fact, I think most women would be
and I
very
think we're
surprised that,
prepared.
yeah,
I
very
think
surprised to hear that
as a
what the
woman,
men think. Yeah. Like, look at that.
yeah,
You
many
remember
women
the,
are very
yeah, remember the,
yeah.
when we
Go
did
on.
the
Hmm.
program on the passport bros, and this guy was saying,
Yeah,
I'm tall, I'm handsome, I have money, and we're just looking at him and wondering, what's wrong
and
with
I
this
can
person?
deal your air. Let me not use it. I'm
He
here
had
to
such
save
a
your
bad
air from
attitude.
poverty.
He had such a bad attitude. I think he ended up calling
He
Kenyan
did
women
have a
monkey.
bad attitude.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
and it
that
didn't
was,
matter what he looked like. The women were
yeah,
just put off. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
all that beauty
yeah.
and handsomeness and everything. In fact, when you saw the comments, what the women were saying in Swahili, they were saying, "Yeah, tall, dark, handsome, and a face that looks as what were they saying in Swahili? A
I
hard
didn't read them,
face, like
but
somebody whose face is so hard and like a sculpture, so inhuman, which is not a positive attribute that women were interested in. Yeah, but basically,
yeah,
I think we need to look at things that are beyond the outside. Yes, it's important. It would be lovely to have the whole package deal. You have that tall, handsome, good, rich, intelligent, polite, whatever. And it really happens. It almost never happens. It almost never happens. It's very difficult for people to have everything. You can't have everything in one human being. Not possible. In fact,
but
a lot of the people who are very, very successful in the world are not tall, dark, and handsome. They're certainly not. In fact, they're completely the opposite. And in fact,
yeah,
men who are on the other side of the scale are known to work much harder and to have much more
yeah. I can't hear you.
life. In fact,
Yeah,
I think the
yeah.
internet is saying goodbye. So we should be, yeah.
Oh,
Hmm.
okay, so I
Yep.
just wanted to just wrap up on
Hmm.
some of the things because I think this is a message that we need to pass here, and it
Yes, the
talks
message
about,
on divorce.
yeah, that
Hmm.
these type of toxic platforms, and like remember I said in the beginning is that there's no problem with having platforms that address certain issues where you're talking to one gender more than the other gender. The problem is when it becomes toxic and when it encourages like extremist views, which are so harmful to that person. And some of the outcomes are that this alpha beta framework, where you have alpha males and beta males, perpetuates negative attitudes towards women, as women, they view women as competition or conquest rather than mutual respect and partnership. So straight away, there's a problem there in the way they view women. In fact, uh, then you have this, then is there an echo chamber where they perpetuate all these negative values. There's not going to be any dissenting voice in that space. And then the manosphere narratives can cause mental distress, because they reinforce negative self-perception. So for the beta males, they feel unattractive to female. But that's not true, as we've established. It's not true. Even for for the males who are more like sensitive, the ones who are emotionally sensitive, that they don't appeal to women. So they are trying to give a different look that women prefer. They encourage cold and distant, people. The alpha archetypical typical behavior, and it
Hmm.
reinforces their insecurities and harmful narratives about rejection, because there is a healthy way of dealing with it, and we know that is it emotional intelligence, when you
Mhm.
can have a discussion, and people don't have to agree with you all the time. Even here, people don't have to
Mhm.
agree with what we say. We are looking forward
No,
to the
not
discourse.
at all.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
the
and I'll
second
be happy
point,
to hear your comments, guys. Go into the comment section and comment on this particular topic. Thank you. Louis
yeah,
is already commenting. He's saying, in my experience in church, work,
yeah,
during college, I have seen men, women that have a good attitude were never single.
yeah.
So singleness seems to be associated to a sort of dysfunctional attitude. Would you agree with Louis on that? That in his experience in church, at work, and in college, he has never seen a man or a woman that have a good attitude be single. They were never single. What do you say about that?
Well, it's likely to be quite true, because it also depends on where that person is in their stage in life, because there could be people with good attitudes but not looking for relationships at that point in their lives. So for
Mhm.
those who are looking for relationships and have good attitudes, that's a correct statement. And actually, that's a healthier state. That's a healthy existence, because you're able to cope. You're able to, like I said, yeah, there's mutual respect and partnership in that relationship. So
Mhm.
regardless of whether you're the male or female in that relationship, there's mutual respect and there's a sense of partnership. But you could also have a good attitude, but you're not ready to get into a relationship. Maybe your school life or whatever it is you're doing in your life is it doesn't allow you that space to have a relationship with somebody.
Yeah.
So it's correct in a certain context, but
Yes.
let's not
It's
exclude
very
those other
contextual.
people.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I would
who
agree
have.
with you, Susan, on some level, but on the other hand, the status of being single, it is not, in my view, at least in my view anyway, it's
A
not,
bad thing.
it doesn't have any sort of bearing on whether or not that whether or not you're a good or bad person. You can't tell whether somebody
No, it
has a good
doesn't.
attitude or not just because they're single.
Yeah,
You cannot.
that's true.
You cannot. Because you
Mm.
see, being single is not a disease. We
No, it
come in,
isn't.
we leave single. Whether you are
Yeah,
married at any point in time, you will end up
yeah.
going alone. You came alone, you are leaving alone. It is not it's not a badge of dishonor. It
No,
is a normal
it isn't.
state. We need to normalize it. It is a normal state.
Yeah,
I think
it's
also
a
the idea
choice.
of
Okay.
saying that I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
pair up and get married just so
Mm-hmm.
that I look like I have a good attitude, that I'm a good person. I mean, what about if you can't find somebody with a good attitude like yourself to get married to when you're
Yeah. Well,
single? You could be single with a
yeah.
good attitude, but everybody around you has bad attitudes. You don't want to get married to them. There's
Yeah.
no, or you just don't find your partner yet. You haven't found your
That's
partner yet.
true. That's
Yeah.
true. It's a
So,
choice. At that level, it's a choice,
there I
because
disagree.
yeah, there
But thanks
there are
anyway.
certain, it's a choice. It's a choice. Being single is a choice. A lot of the times, uh, it could also be people looking and have not yet found, and others just prefer to be single. But that doesn't make them bad people, like you're saying. So it's not really. But in the context of um, Louis' description, in terms of the people he's seen who have healthy relationships, who are who are emotionally healthy, seem to be able to have relationships. But it doesn't exclude the other group of people who are healthy people but have either chosen to be single, or it's not, they haven't found the right person, or it's not the right time for them to even get into a relationship, whatever. There are many variables in that. So he's talking about a very small subsect of people. So the other thing is, the people fall into these manosphere spaces because they need a support system. So, but the response is now how to deal with this is that we look at this way. They seek help online, and this help they're getting is from the manosphere figures online, and who offer misguidance rather than guidance. And I got this. These are psychologists who are making these observations, because they've had to treat some of these gentlemen who have try to get out of it and realize that it's so damaging to their relationships, the people they care about, their family around them, that they realize on their own that this is a toxic space. That some men also struggle with understanding their role in modern society amidst evolving gender norms. So they want like a return to what we call the traditional setting, which is not possible because people have moved on differently. So they turn to online communities for camaraderie and a sense of belonging. Also, they could have experienced childhood traumatic events. Um, and the younger they are more impressionable. And because they're more impressionable, they're more they open to influence, which can radicalize them. So they are trying to make sense of their emotions because they can't really understand it, and relationships, and establish a sense of identity. The other one is that the manosphere steps in to provide, this is what they believe, a sense of identity and purpose, of understanding on traditional masculinity as a solution, which we know is a problem. It can't really work well today because of the changing values that we are seeing. And so some of the, how do men exit this space? They discover on their own personal reflection and external support. They recognize the negative impacts of it on their mental health, their relationships, and their well-being. They realize that the ideology is harmful to themselves and others they care deeply for. Um, they have they discover positive, compassionate experiences with women who challenge that view, you know, about women. They get support from female friends. They find alternative communities, which are now people who have been there and they realize it's a bad space, so they've started communities to really help people heal um, from it. There's access to mental health support. On that, I actually reached out to somebody I know who's a psychologist, and I asked, "Do you a counselor?" And I asked, "Do you ever get such cases?" And she said, "Yes, they do. Even here in Kenya, where people are suffering, have to go for counseling because of toxic masculinity. The attitude is all wrong, and toward women, which is very, really, really harmful. The other thing is strong family support system. The other one is they realize it's not sustainable to maintain the alpha male persona, because you're supposed to be this cold, uh, person, this person who looks down on women and all that. Also self-acceptance. They look for the true sources to help them, and realization that feminism is not meant to harm, but is rather to address issues of gender inequality that benefits everybody. So these are some of the views from the psychologists, that this is the way they can get out of it, is just have this change of heart. But mostly, many of them have come out of it when they realize it's actually harming them. So these are some of the ideas that we find entering into marriages, into that cause they perpetuate gender-based violence. They validate it, and because women are lesser beings, that women are the cause of all their problems and all that, and so they end up, the gender-based violence is meted out on the women. It causes separation, in certain judicial separation or even physical separation, because like we talked about earlier, separation sometimes may not be um, mandated by the court, but rather a choice that the parties have made, and they've chosen to live separately. So there's no official order. In fact, if you check that marriage certificate is still valid, so there's a lot of pain that is caused by extreme views in marriages, whether it's customary views, which are enhanced by which we find in which are toxic to the relationship. And like we talked about, it could be both ways. We could have also very toxic behaviors in females, which completely damage and mess relationship. And it is very true that when the courts are considering the best interest of the child, usually the children go with the mother, because the mother is seen as the one who usually is with the children anyway. In many contexts, the mother is the one who is with the children anyway. So, and something that we noticed, we were talking about the reporting on these cases, and and it's unfortunate that some of them don't really. Some reporters and some journalists are really careful about the way they report on sexual and gender-based violence, but there are certain rules that the media, the journalists are supposed to follow, that they don't always follow. So I'll just give you some highlights. One is to prioritize safety. When you're watching one of those videos that you see somebody is reporting, first of all, they have to give the purpose of really showing that video. Mostly it is for advocacy or awareness on sexual and gender-based violence. And it is supposed to have a positive impact to articulate the views, or to show or to demonstrate, that this is not a good thing. It's also supposed to empower the person who's giving the story. So it prioritize, when you report gender-based violence, you have to prioritize the safety of the survivor. And that is both in the space where that person is going, that interview is going to be done, and also to make sure that you're not putting them further into risk, because the danger may still be lurking somewhere. So that means that you need to be very careful about, what you say, how much you expose even of the whereabouts of that person, in case that trouble is still there. Remember, in a previous video, we talked about this lady, I think she was called Maureen, and she was saying that her husband that she had been separated from was still stalking her, and he would send her messages and tell her, I've seen you somewhere, so that fear is real. So and also, as when you're talking about safety, you have to assess the physical and emotional and financial situation of the person, and you avoid reporting details that could expose this person further. The other one is to be respectful. So respect, that is the right to refuse to answer. Don't compel answers. Like we saw in one of the interviews that we were watching, that which has actually come under a lot of trouble, negative comments from other journalists, is the one of Sarah Kabu, where the interviewer was trying to push for answers, and both actually, the man and the woman, both Sarah and Kabu himself, did not want to answer certain questions, but the person seemed to be, journalist was trying to push them to talk about things they didn't want to talk about. Which, apart from the fact that some of this matter is in court to some extent, there's some questions that they didn't want to talk about. For instance, Sarah was asked about her allegation, well, not her allegations, which was asked about the gender-based violence. And she said, this is a Christmas party, I don't want to talk about it. And she managed to quite skillfully change the subject, but it was an inappropriate question, I thought, in that setting, because it looks like they were actually at a social event where that question was asked. So this was, and people have really come out and said that is not journalism. And then she said, so when the person refuses to answer, you need to understand that perhaps that person is being re-traumatized or has their own reasons for not answering that question. And then you also have to avoid judgmental language. So, for instance, some of the cases we looked at, where and some of the comments were really nasty, in the comment section. For instance, the Florence case where she was Florence and Elias's case. There were some nasty comments there, judging Florence because of some videos
Just
they've
based on a
seen.
video that has not even been analyzed.
Yeah,
This
about
is the
her
situation
relationship with.
for those people who don't remember, this is about this guy called Elias, who was a pastor, who literally just like hacked off the fingers of his wife or girlfriend, just because he had an altercation. And then he came to court and presented a video that had actually not been validated as real or authentic But in the comment sector, in the comment section, we had all netizens, you know, making specific comments, and basically blaming the victim. Yeah. But in winding up, I think, Susan, in winding up, I also want to remind us that we have to remember that, like Louis is saying here, that we have to also consider things to do with attitude. And he's suggesting that that could be the
Yeah,
next topic of our discussion, that we need to look at attitude. And
yeah,
I remember coming across a video by Jordan Peterson. I think everybody knows him. He's online a lot, and he's quite
yeah,
a somebody who's well known. But he said that actually the people who benefit most from marriage are men. The people who
yeah,
need marriage most are men.
yeah,
Why? Because men rely on women for emotional support.
yeah. I saw
Emotional
that.
stability of men is
Yeah,
dependent on their women. Men should never forget that. It's actually true. It's actually true. And women should
mm,
also know that that is where they have the greatest impact on their man. You'll hear a lot of men say that she gives me peace. You know? Why do men say that? Why did you choose this woman? Eventually you'll find that a lot of men don't choose their partners based on their looks. Eventually they choose them based on how they make them feel.
yeah,
The peace, because men are fighting wars every single day. So if you are that woman who can bring peace into your home, yeah, that is what the men tend to say. She gives me peace of mind. She gives me peace of mind. Yeah. And a woman who nags a man, is exactly the opposite. Doesn't give him peace of mind, right? I wish we had a man over here who could tell us whether that was true or not. And then there's also a saying I came across that says, us men are more sensitive than we are allowed to admit.
yeah,
Us men are more sensitive than we are allowed to admit. So what that means for women is that we should be very sensitive to what men are not saying. If you're married, or if you're in a relationship, or if you want one, start to read the signs, because a lot of things men are known to be horrible communicators. Yeah, horrible communicators. So we have to use our intuition to understand what they're not saying and read them correctly, and not use that opportunity then to put them down, or to bring up issues that increase their levels of stress. And
yeah,
so those are the kinds of things that also can initiate, should I say men, especially men who are not self-aware, who do not recognize that they need a woman for their own emotional stability. They will not value their wives or their girlfriends who bring them that emotional stability. And they'll go running off with the latest damsel, yeah, in high heels and a super curly wig. You know what I mean, eh? I'm
yeah,
saying that
yeah,
because my hair is straight right now. You know what I mean, huh? Yeah. And I'm not in high heels at all. Yeah. So I'm saying, if you are that woman who makes a man feel comfortable, and the man suddenly just gets, distracted by what he sees with his eyes visually, forgetting what he actually needs, that is when they make a mistake. And then the woman now starts to plan 7 times before giving forgiving him and forgiving him and forgiving him, before she gives off and files for divorce. Because they say that over 80% of marriages are divorces are initiated by women. And it's
yeah,
not to say that it's only women who initiate divorce, and that it's only men who are perpetrators of relationship problems. No, 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 certainly
yeah,
not that. It's just to say, based on the statistics, based on what's the majority, and based on the negative commentary that I see, especially from men, from males towards females. You talk about the manosphere, toxic
yeah,
masculinity,
yeah,
hyper
mm,
masculinity. Yeah, that is because these are men who are completely unself-aware. They are actually operating in their emotional, on the manosphere, totally untamed, you know, because they don't have that woman who is grounding them. And you can
mm,
already see that that is what they're missing. What's missing from those guys on the manosphere is that woman who just makes them feel comfortable and secure, emotionally
yeah,
at peace. Yeah. So they're at war, actually. So they're at war with women. And you can tell why. It's because they don't have those women there, and they don't recognize that they need women for this reason, and therefore what they say to women matters. And they forget that what they say to women, women are listening and hearing and
Yeah.
internalize. Yeah, women internalize. Men forget that women are not visual creatures. Women are not interested
Yeah,
in
we're
visual.
not.
They're not really that visual. We're not.
Yeah.
But men,
So,
those men on the manosphere, they're always talking about, oh, high value woman. High value woman is a woman who blah blah blah. It's always visual. But they
yeah.
forget that women are not women are listening to what they're saying. Yeah, women are listening to this. And then they forget what they really need. And in the end, they kind of shoot themselves in the foot. And when it comes to marriage, it's the same thing. The same thing. The man who is not aware of what he needs. And then on the other hand, the man who is aware of what he needs, then, he will try to cultivate that environment at home as much as possible. Or the woman would make sure that she also cultivates that environment. But I think, guys, it's been a long show, 1.5 hours, and I think we should be winding out in the next 1 minute. Final words, Susan, that you have to say. And thank you
Okay.
very much for being on the comment section, Louis. Where's everybody else tonight? I guess it's been very late, but I hope you're going to be watching it later. If you're watching the show later, please remember to thumbs the show up, and we'll be back with you on Wednesday and on Friday. Thank you very much for tolerating us tonight, even if it's a late show. And thank you very much for participating. Those of you who are watching us, I can see 4, 5, 6 sometimes, but I don't see very many people in the comment section. Remember that you can go into StreamYard and actually come into the studio with us and participate and make this even more of a lively debate. We know that there are a lot of relationships that are going through a lot of struggles, and the Christmas season and holiday season highlights and creates even makes it even more highlighted, at this time. So I think it's good for people to take stock of their relationships and decide which way you want to which way you want to take your relationship going forward in 2025. We need to really take stock of the past, the present, and think about where we're going in future. Yeah, that's what I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think,
Mhm.
Susan? That's all I
Yeah.
have to say.
I think it's really important to have to avoid spaces that will exacerbate or make your attitude towards members of the other gender worse. And so, any extremist sections or platforms, we need to be aware of them because they can actually damage not just your relationship with your spouse or partner or friend, but they can actually damage you. And that's what is being seen by these toxic masculinity spaces where the relationship between male and females is being affected so adversely by the wrong perception, which we have talked about here, about how women behave or what women like and stuff like that. And perhaps there should be more concentration. There should be groups that are going to really help people to understand perhaps better ways of approaching members of the opposite gender, and looking inwardly to see what can you improve about yourself that will make you perhaps more attractive to the other person, and not for men to tell women how they are. We really cannot. We cannot tell men how they are, but we can, and they can also not tell us how we are, because these toxic spaces are the men telling the other men how women are, and obviously they've got the picture completely wrong. The other thing, of course, is to be really sensitive around those people. One of the languages that you must not use when you're dealing with people who are victims, or not victims, people who have suffered gender-based violence, um, is they're not supposed to be called victims. The politically correct word is survivor. And when you're listening to their story, when your friend has come to you and is telling you that sort of story, you need to make sure that, first of all, you keep that information confidential to the extent you are able to. Even the reporters, we found them being quite lax in some of these things, but we've seen some who are doing the right thing, not showing us the faces, and especially if the women are in a shelter, we don't even know where that shelter is, and we can't see the person's face. Um, Obtaining consent and stuff like that, and to ensure that we should all be advocates that against gender-based violence, and we're talking about gender-based violence against men, women, boys, and girls. It's completely unacceptable. And let's keep away from these extremist people, views, and spaces. They're not good for relationships at all. They result in they cause us a lot of pain. And like I told you, the extreme can go all the way to not just mass shootings, but even to being involved in extremist terrorist activities,
Mhm.
which we really
Yeah,
don't want to see at all, at
yeah,
all.
yeah.
That's it
True.
for me.
Yeah, and maybe thank
Mm.
you so much, Susan. And maybe to wind up, and also want to say that other greater impacts of these toxic spaces is a high level of divorces, which we're not, propagating. That's one, that people are just not getting along. A high rate of unhappiness, among singles and married people. People are not happy. It's difficult to find happy people today, that to the point where there's some people who, if you smile or you laugh, they think you're pretending. They really don't believe. They think you're putting on a show when you're laughing or smiling. They're like, what's wrong with that one? You look like the odd one out. Yeah. And you're like, you have to explain why you're happy. Excuse me, everybody else here, we have agreed that everybody is angry here or not happy. So who are you to try to show us that you could be happy today? What makes you happy? So that's what the other issue. And then there's a high rate of infertility. People are not having children. And let me tell you, one day when this world doesn't have kids, already you can see that everywhere you go, there are fewer and fewer kids around. And it's going to make for a very bad society in future, a very insecure and very sad environment without children and without people to continue the human race. And to the point where now you find some governments are even paying university students up to the age of 25 to have children. This is how bad it's getting. And I think that social media is playing a huge role in propagating negative attitudes of women and men. And so we also have to be aware of the wider agenda. We know what the wider agenda is, and we know it's not positive towards the family. So what we have to do is fight back. Fight back. Yeah, so we have to fight back with everything, and also check the information and the sources of information that you have, because in the
Yeah.
end, joy is a command. For those of you who are Christians, joy is a command. You are commanded to be joyful. So you have to seek happiness. There's so much, like in these books of faith, where they say, seek happiness and pursue it. Seek peace and pursue it. So what are we seeking? We're always at war with each other on these spaces. And we have to stop that. So maybe going through into the future, into next year, we have to also give people space. We have to give people's relationships space. And when people are going through difficult times like the Kabus, and call them out when those journalists, are asking inappropriate questions. And I think we have done a good job of doing that. I think we have to recognize that in the end, you and I would probably not be here if somebody didn't get married along the way in our ancestral lineage somewhere. We are here as a result of somebody deciding to get married to somebody else. That's a fact. So we
Yeah.
can't say that marriage is a scam. It's not, unless you think you're a
No.
scam yourself. Unless you think your
Yeah.
life is a scam. You can't say marriage is a scam because somebody got married somewhere in your lineage. Your great great grandfather, grandmother got married, and that's why you're here today. So let's respect marriage and let's just try to see how we can get along, yeah, and try to fix what's broken in our relationships because we are broken people and it's broken people marrying broken people. And so the only thing we can do is try to mend the cracks and try to see how we can improve our lives and not expect perfection because nobody's going to be perfect. And I think, we need to talking about these things, about broken people because we are broken. But the reason that, I mean, that kind of makes life kind of exciting because what's the point of being all perfect people in the world? You know, it's more fun to work with broken people because they're more interesting. Yeah. So the idea is just to try to mend ourselves and try to get along, and also, like you're saying, avoid those spaces Susan is saying, talking about the manosphere, the red pill movement. Yeah, all of that is not positive. It's not propagating any happiness. We want happiness, and we want our families to be strong and healthy. And this is not a
Yeah.
popular or an SEXY topic, but we have to make it that. We have to reclaim it. We have to reclaim our joy and our happiness. So, on that note, guys, we'll see you on Wednesday. Yeah, Susan? We'll
Yeah.
see you on Wednesday. Yeah. And
Yeah.
we'll probably be having late night shows because it is December. We'll probably be having later shows. And just catch us. If you don't catch us on the live show, you'll catch us in the recording. Okay. Thank you very much for the thumbs up and the hearts and everything. Do appreciate it. And
Yeah.
please call your friends, ask them to join African Queen Mo. And today we had Susan leading the show. Susan did a fabulous, phenomenal job. And thank you, phenomenal job. Thank you very much, Susan. We are enlightened every day, and we're soon going to become pseudo lawyers with you in all these matters, relationships. So, on that note, everybody, it's good night and good day wherever you're watching from, and catch you again on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Goodbye. Thank you all.
Enjoy.
Bye
Yeah.
bye. Bye bye.
Enjoy.
Enjoy. Enjoy.